Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Parashat Yitro, beginning in the book of Exodus, chapter 18. This portion is named for one of the most intriguing figures in all of Torah, Jethro, in Hebrew, Yitro, the priest of Midian, a former idolater who becomes a seeker of truth and ultimately acknowledges the greatness of the God of Israel. Arriving at the Israelite camp after hearing of their miraculous redemption, Yitro offers wise counsel to his son-in-law Moshe, advising him to establish a structured judicial system to govern the people. But beyond Yitro's personal journey, this portion contains the pinnacle of divine revelation and the greatest watershed event in human history, the Sinai experience, where God speaks to the entire nation, presenting them with the Ten Commandments and forging an eternal covenant. The presence of Yitro at this pivotal moment in history urges us to explore who he was, what his presence signifies in the grand narrative of Torah, and what life lessons his journey brings to each and every one of us today. We were first introduced to Yitro back in the beginning of Exodus, in Parashat Shemot, when Moshe fled to Midian to escape Pharaoh's wrath. There, Moshe sat down by a well and wound up defending the daughters of the priest of Midian, who were being harassed by the local shepherds. Their father invited Moshe in to stay, and to make a long story short, he gave Moshe his daughter Tzipporah in marriage. Back there, in that first portion of Shemot, the man is initially called Ruel, but a few verses later, as chapter 3 begins, he is identified as Yitro. The thing is, as we will learn, Yitro had 7 names, and these names are the key to understanding both his past and his transformation. So open up your heart. Yitro's spiritual transformation is one of the most remarkable stories in all of Torah. His journey makes his story all the more inspiring, from being deeply embedded in falsehood to becoming Moshe's father-in-law, advisor, and a sincere seeker of divine truth. He was no simple pagan priest, but a grand religious leader, one of the most prominent authority figures in the ancient world. And despite his misguided spiritual path, he was a man of great intelligence, integrity, and leadership, and his wisdom and prominence made him an important figure sought after for counsel. In the past, Yitro had been known as the dawn of all idol worshippers, having experimented with every form of idolatry. In the words of the ancient Midrash Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael, there was no form of idol worship in the whole world that Yitro did not serve. In his search for meaning, he systematically explored every known religion. Unlike other people who were merely raised in idolatry, he actively pursued it as a philosophy and was not merely a passive participant, but a passionate advocate and a teacher of pagan rites. But all his experiences gave him ample opportunity to test and see the emptiness of all of these false gods, and ultimately, he reached his verdict. When he learned of the miracles of the Exodus that God wrought for Israel, such as the splitting of the sea and the war against Amalek, this confirmed to him that the God of Israel is the one true God. And thus, chapter 18 and verse 11 informs us that he declared, "Now I know that Hashem is greater than all gods." His declaration of "now I know" alludes to him having personally investigated and rejected all other belief systems. He didn't merely accept Torah blindly. He arrived at the truth through deep contemplation and personal experience. But open up your heart so deep, because Yitro's break with idolatry was a costly decision. Midrash teaches that when he realized the futility of idolatry and turned to the one God of Israel, he renounced his role as the priest of Midian. And in that role, he had had wealth, fame, and influence, and he wielded great power. He gave it all up for the sake of clinging to the truth. But this decision caused a public scandal. The Midianites turned against their former leader, and he was excommunicated and abandoned. His own townspeople and followers shunned him and treated him and his family as outcasts. This is exactly why Torah tells us, back in Parashat Shemot in chapter 2, verse 17, that his daughters were persecuted, driven away from the well by the local shepherds. Rashi states explicitly that Yitro's daughters were harassed at the well because their father had abandoned idolatry, and now the family was scorned and rejected. Once a respected leader, he now lived on the margins of society. And commenting on the very first verse in our portion, Rashi cites the teaching of our sages from the Midrash Mechilta that Yitro had 7 names, and he lists them. What's up with all these names, and why do we need to know this? Who gave them to him, and why did he have so many? No teaching or Torah lesson of our holy sages is merely anecdotal. So what is the message of Yitro's names for us today? So open up your heart in the very deepest way. First, we need to understand that the concept of a name is extremely deep. Now, in Western culture, names are very often arbitrary labels, and they're not given a lot of thought. But in Torah, names are channels of divine energy and an expression of the soul. For example, the act of naming a child is considered a significant and spiritual moment of sacred responsibility. And the Holy Arizal teaches that parents are not simply choosing a name at random or according to their personal preference, but they're given a measure of divine inspiration. It's a spark of true prophecy when naming a child. The chosen name will have a profound impact on their child's life and destiny. And parents may not always understand why they choose a name, but whether or not they are aware, the name given to a child will reflect the child's unique mission in life and conveys the soul's mission. Thus, as the verse in Genesis 5:29 relates, the name Noach means this one will bring us comfort. And in Exodus 2:10, we find that Pharaoh's daughter named Moshe, for he was drawn from the water, hinting at his role in leading Israel through water and other aspects of his relationship with the element of water. In Torah, names reflect a spiritual calling linked to a person's purpose, past and future. And thus, on a deep level, one's name is like the key to one's soul. In fact, the Hebrew word for soul, neshama, and the Hebrew word for name, shem, they share the same root letters, shin and mem. This linguistic connection is significant because in Hebrew, the root of a word always conveys its fundamental meaning and essence. The connection between the words neshama and shem reflect a profound relationship between one's soul and one's name. A name is the spiritual channel for one's life force, and thus, changing a name can change one's destiny. And so God changes Avram's name to Avraham and Sarai to Sarah to reflect their new mission. He added Yisrael to Yaakov as a new layer of identity, and he changed Hosea to Yehoshua. Now we can begin to understand the secret of Yitro's names. The sages teach us that his names were Yeter, Yitro, Chovav, Ruel, Putiel, Chever, and Keni. Each one of these 7 names were given to him by God, and each one represents a stage of spiritual evolution on his path from idolatrous priest to lover of Torah. Yitro, his most commonly known name, meaning his addition, is the name that was given to him after making his commitment to Hashem. Yeter, from the same root, also alludes to an addition, and this name is in honor of a section being added to the Torah on his account. That is, his advice to Moshe to set up a system of delegated judges, which led to the establishment of Israel's judicial system, as we learn here in this Torah portion of Yitro. Chovav, meaning beloved, because he loved the God of Israel and his Torah, and was beloved of God. Ruel, meaning friend of God, because he attained such a level of closeness to God that the Almighty considered him his close friend. These names are particularly significant because they demonstrate that one does not need to be born into Israel to love and be devoted to Hashem. The name Putiel, that's the name that refers to his rejection of idolatry, and that's what led him to his complete spiritual transformation. And he was called Chever, meaning companion, because he became a companion of Israel, binding himself to the nation and their mission and their fate. And Keni, one who acquires, since he acquired truth and righteousness and passed them down to his descendants, who remained loyal friends and allies of Israel and continued to dwell among Israel as recorded in Judges chapter 1. The word Keni also means zealous, indicating Yitro's fervor and passion for righteousness and justice. And so thus, these names chart his growth and track and mark the stages of his journey, from an outsider to a friend of God, from a seeker to one who cherished Torah wisdom on the deepest level of his soul and was called by God. And the deepest secret is the very fact that these names were not given by men, but they reflect how God called Yitro by name, by multiple names, each name revealing how Hashem saw him at each stage of his spiritual development and journey. Midrash Tanchuma states, a person is known by 3 names: the name given by their parents, the name given by others, and the name they earn for themselves. Some people grow into their names, some don't live up to their name, and others surpass or redefine their name. Just as God gave Abraham and Sarah new names to reflect their mission, so too did he name Yitro according to his growth. These names reflect Yitro's life journey of becoming. The former idolatrous priest became Chovav, beloved of God, and Ruel, God's friend. His journey from idolatry to recognizing the one God mirrors the spiritual path of many seekers today, reminding us that Torah is not an exclusive privilege, but meant for all who genuinely seek Hashem. And thus, Yitro is a figure of hope, of transformation, and the universality of Torah. And his story is deeply relevant to those who have come from other traditions in search of truth. Yitro's names foreshadow the future journey of all those who seek Hashem, because God calls people by the name they earn, commensurate to their seeking. In this light, Yitro is the quintessential example of what it means for God to call someone by name. So open up your heart deeper than ever. In an intriguing Talmudic lesson, we are informed that when a person departs from this world and the soul comes before Hashem for judgment in the next world, the soul is asked, "What is your name?" And the sages teach that although the soul remembers every detail of their life in this world, ironically, the one thing that most people invariably forget is their name, and the soul cannot answer. This inability to answer can cause a soul great consternation and shame. On a deeper level of understanding, we are taught that this is not simply a question, but a test. If a person lived up to the potential of their name, their soul remains cognizant of that connection in the next world as well. But if a person strayed from their essence, it will be near impossible struggle to remember their name. In this lesson as well, we see the same deep truth that one's name is one's soul's identity. True greatness is measured by transformation, and Yitro's transformation from the world's leading foremost pagan priest to a follower of the God of Israel and the father-in-law of Moshe exemplifies the idea that the Torah's covenant was intended for all sincere seekers of truth, regardless of their origins. Yitro had no obligation to embrace the God of Israel, yet he freely chose truth over comfort. His faith was hard-earned and deeply personal. His recognition of God signified a major spiritual shift for all the nations, and this is why the portion of the Sinai revelation is named for him, because Torah is about transformation. His 7 divinely given names teach us that the search for truth is honored by Hashem and demonstrate that a person's past does not define them. Only their choices do. One's past is not an obstacle to spiritual greatness, and anyone who sincerely searches for truth can become a Ruel, a friend of God. So open up your heart deeper than ever before in your whole life. Spiritual growth is a process of acquiring new names. We too have different names before God as we grow. Hashem calls each of us by name according to our spiritual level, not where we were born, but how we seek him. In the Messianic era, it's promised that every soul will fully embody its true name, who we were meant to be. As Isaiah prophesies in chapter 43, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." Our name before God is not static but fluid. It depends on our level of seeking and transformation. A person's inner true name, the Zohar teaches, is revealed through their deeds. Perhaps even as we speak, Hashem is giving us names that reflect where we've been, our growth, our love, our struggles, and our longing for truth. Let's ask ourselves, what name are we earning today? And perhaps the greatest question we can ask is, when Hashem calls my name, what will it be?